Carlos Enrique Raposo is the Kaiser, and he's a man who was born into relative poverty in Rio de Janeiro. Instead of trying to find a way through life by, getting a nice middle-class job, or, as is quite often the case if you're poor in Rio, going into maybe a life of crime or something a bit worse, he decided to fake an entire football career as a football player, lived the life of a celebrity. So he really is a kind of a catch-me-if-you-can sort of meets football player type character, really.
So how did he get away with it?
He managed to create this character, and ultimately he befriended, some of the biggest names in Brazilian football. And they liked this guy so much that they'd actually take him to clubs. He was in such good physical condition that he would actually go and do pre-season. And you're talking about an era where players would come back. They weren't quite as professional as they are today. The talent was amazing, but he was actually much fitter than these guys. So he would go in and do pre-season, and he'd destroy these guys in pre-season. And he'd sign a contract before they'd actually ever seen him kick a ball.
But when the ball came, he would pretend to be injured. And of course, no MRI scans back in the day. So it was his word versus the doctors. And by that point, he'd had the whole club's players were friends with him. And one of his biggest tricks was to befriend the bosses of the club, so the chairman, who at the time, especially in Rio, quite a lot of them were mafia bosses. There's a famous story in the film. The sort of head mafia boss of Brazil, a guy called Castro de Andrade, ran a small team called Bangu. And they're kind of like the Leicester City of the 80s in Brazil. They went from nothing to nearly winning the Brazilian Championship. And he really wanted to see Kaiser play. And so demanded that he was going on to go on the bench, and then demanding that he come on the pitch when they went 2-0 down in a game against Curitiba. And he was obviously scared of showing that he had absolutely no talent whatsoever. So he decided to start a fight with his own team supporters and cause a riot and get himself intentionally sent off before the game, before he had to show his talent. And then somehow managed to get his contract extended with his good, his good chat and his charisma.
Could somebody do what he did today?
Impossible. It's the 80s and 90s. Everything was a bit more word of mouth back in those days. And there's no internet. And it's that city, it's that easygoing vibe. The beach in Rio is a great democratizer. You've got some of the richest properties in Brazil and some of the poorest of the favelas right next to each other. But everyone goes to the beach and everyone mingles. So he navigated that society at that time.
The other thing is, he made it in the most difficult place to make it as a professional footballer, in the golden era, when Brazilian players still played domestically in Brazil, so they hadn't all come to Europe. So it was even more difficult to get into the squads in comparison to today.